folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and got Louis Camerasano back on the line for another gold and silver update. We're going to talk about the premiums. We're going to talk about the sales of Eagles and other coins. And Louis, how you doing today?
Rory, I'm doing splendid. How are you?
I'm doing all right. And Louis runs the smallgold.com website. Want to make sure that people understand where you're coming from.
That's right. Smallgold.com. Please check it out.
All right. And let's just jump right in.
That silver for industry. We need to demonetize silver. It's only good for industry. And then the next year they took it out of the coins and they stopped with the silver certificates after that. That wasn't the same thing as the gold, where they were
Right.
demonetizing gold. The silver, they just figured, they just thought that they got rid of the strategic stockpiles too in 1981, 82.
Yeah, and I knew that. Yeah, and they had like 1 billion ounces or something, didn't they?
Correct. Yes. Now the only stockpile they have is to make the Eagles. They don't have that much.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've only got about probably 5.5 million ounces hanging around each month, because that's what they're doing a month is 5 million. So I figure they need about 500,000.
Yeah, actually, what they do is they get the silver in the form. They have that, but then they also get their silver from, I don't know if they send it over to the Sunshine Mint or the Sunshine Mint procures it. And then there's two other mints that they use privately. I don't remember which ones they are. Then they send over the blanks.
Right.
So I think they still keep the stockpile in non-blank form. And that's why you get it, what they call a shortage. It isn't really a shortage, it's a production bottleneck because it's not in the form that you want it.
I'm looking at this chart that you produced for your article, Sales of American Silver Eagles Smash February Record, which is a great headline, which is a fact. And the chart shows from 1986 to 2007 for the entire year, for that almost 20 years, for that 19-year span. I'm sorry, 21-year span.
Correct.
They sold less Eagles than they did in January and February of 2016. That is mind-boggling.
Yeah, every single year they never managed to break. I think 2002 had 10.3 million. All the other years were below 10 million, and in January and February, we did 10.736 this year.
That is just incredible.
That's a run rate of over, about 60 million a year.
Yeah, a little bit more actually.
Yeah.
About 62 million.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see how that pans out.
They may stop early, so you can't really count December because they shut down production at some point in December. But then, the big sales months last year, which was strange, were in the middle of the summer when they normally kind of go down a bit, the summer months. We'll see.
Yeah. And are premiums going up at this point? I know you keep a pretty close eye on the premiums also.
And no, they are staying around the retail level if you buy just a few, according to APMEX prices, which are pretty much what everyone else charges. And they are an authorized purchaser. They're about 25%. I mean, they had gone up to 50% last September, October during that shortage, which at the time, as we were talking earlier, when they had to introduce, the Perth Mint introduced the silver kangaroo in order to, meet the demand that the Silver Eagle the U.S. Mint wasn't able to meet with the Silver Eagle.
Yeah, and they're on pace to break 12 million of just the kangaroo for this year.
The Perth Mint reports total ounces of silver. They don't break it down by.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right, but the bulk of it is the kangaroo. The kangaroo sales. They have done 6 months in a row of over 1 million ounces of silver since the kangaroo was introduced. And prior to that, the monthly totals for Perth Mint silver were in the 2 to 4, 500,000 ounce range And ever since September, they've done between the first month, September 2015, they did about 3.5 million.
Yep.
They did close to 2 million in October, a million and a half in January this year, and they did broke over a million this year in February.
See, and once again, that comes back to the same question that I continually ask: where is it coming from? But we know. I mean, you sent me an email yesterday or this morning about Australia's overall, the country of Australia being their silver mining production.
That was the gold mining, Roy.
I'm sorry, gold mining.
So Australia doesn't really have, nor does India. A lot of these countries that are gold consumers don't really have much in the way of silver mining. The big silver mining countries are the biggest one is Mexico.
Yes.
And Mexico produces the largest amount of silver. China produces a decent amount as well, but you never see that either. That they scoop that up for their solar needs.
Well, they were doing about 100 million ounces a year before they stopped, and then they became a 100 ounce or 100 million ounce purchaser
Correct.
of silver. So that's a 200 million ounce swing, and that's never stopped. And that was
right.
about 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. Maybe not quite that long, but it's been several years now that change occurred.
Right. And when you talk about where's the silver coming from, they're still pumping out, as we've discussed for the last couple of weeks back and forth, silver mining production in Mexico, whether it's up 1% or down 1% in 2015 is kind of irrelevant. The point is 2014 was a very, very big year for silver mining production, and it was a very big year for almost all the publicly reporting silver miners, including the largest primary silver miner in the world, Franzillo, produced 4.5% more silver in 2015 than 14. So it's coming from mining production, as you know, the secondary supply. Not, I don't mean secondary in terms of miners, but secondary in terms of supply where people turn in their silver to melt it down. That's down so much that almost all of the silver in the last couple of years that is used for industry and used for investment is coming from the silver miners, and they're pumping it out to meet that close to billion ounce demand every year.
And I don't see that going down. I mean, because as we were just talking about, the Perth Mint is now running at higher than or more than a 500,000 ounce per month increase. So that's another 6 million ounces of silver just for that one mint.
Correct.
Of an increase. Not to mention what we were talking about a minute ago. I mean, if the U.S. Mint stays on pace with where it is currently, and they wind up doing, between 50 and 60 million ounces, that's once again a gigantic increase. Royal Canadian Mint, even though they're on ration sales as well, they're probably going to have new sales volume. So, I mean, and I don't know if you got to listen to that interview I did with Eric Sprott just a few days ago. He was saying that, and it makes sense, that there's only about 20% of the global silver mining production that's available for investment.
Right.
So, and as you and I discussed a couple weeks ago, Lewis, we know that Morocco, I mistakenly called Africa a country. It's Morocco that's bringing online 1.1 million homes with solar energy. That's an enormous amount of silver. Now that'll take a couple of years for that to pan out, but it's got to come from somewhere.
Right. So what you're highlighting, Rory, is that the industrial demand is at least going to be constant over the next few years. It doesn't look like that's going to go down, but the investment demand is exploding. And we talked about in 2006 that coin and bar sales were 5-6% of overall silver demand annually. Now, with this massive increase in round bars and then the sovereign mint production of silver, it's up to about 23, 24, 25%. And that has to cut into the amount of silver, as Eric was talking about, Eric Sprott, that's available for industry. I mean, whether you earmark it for industry or you earmark it for investment, it still comes from the same pie. And
Right.
there's many people at the table asking for more pie. And I don't know how much longer the silver miners can produce it. And the easiest way for more supply to come online would be the price goes up. I don't know if that can make, I don't think the silver miners can produce more just because the price goes up. But what it can do is bring online a lot of the scrap silver that's been waiting around to turn in, because it certainly doesn't make sense to turn in coins you bought at $30, $40 and get $15 for them. But
No,
that will happen when the price rises. Silverware and scrap silver will come to market when the price rises, and it did happen in 2011.
it did, and there was a gigantic increase in the silverware, or the I hate to call it scrap, but
Hmm.
the secondary silver that came back flooding back into market
But you
when
have
when the price was up in north of $30 an ounce.
but here's the difference, right, between gold and silver. When gold comes in back onto market because of a price increase, someone else gets it and then stores it, hoards it, buries it, holds on to it. When silver comes back onto the market to meet industrial demand, it just gets used up and then it's gone.
Exactly.
And that actually depletes the amount of silver that, not only do the stockpiles that are out there, when I say stockpiles, I mean all the silver in people's drawers and so on, that silver goes away when it comes back on market, as does most of the silver that is mined and then consumed immediately. And everything right now we have, the gold price seems to have gone up and the silver price hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, the silver price has kind of receded. And I kind of think that's like, before a tsunami, that the tide kind of goes all the way out before it
Yes.
comes roaring back. And I think what's going to happen is the silver demand is there at the retail level, but not industrial, investment demand always starts, I think, when people are worried about the financial system. Gold is the go-to metal because it's primarily a monetary metal. We saw the other day that they released figures that central banks have bought gold for the most years in a row since 1965. So people go to gold first, even though silver's been money longer. It's been demonetized, So there are no central banks that hold silver. There are no countries that have silver coins. So basically, the investment money goes to gold first. And if gold, I think, Rory, can hold, consolidate, and rise from where we are now, then the money takes a look at the silver sister, and that's when silver starts to go up. So I'm not concerned right now that silver hasn't gone up with gold. I don't expect it to, because when people get nervous, the first thing they do is buy gold, and then when gold gets too expensive, they look at silver. And that's exactly what happened. If you look what happened in 2008, the gold silver ratio was about 80 to 1, 83 to 1, just like it is now. People got nervous, they moved into gold. Silver was down to what, $8 an ounce, if you remember.
Yep.
But then, if you recall, Rory, what happened? It came roaring back and blew the doors off of gold. It went from like $8 to $50. Gold only went to 1,900 from $700, $800. I would say only, but I mean it's a percentage gain that
Yeah.
silver had.
Percentage. Yeah.
But if you think of what silver did, it did that kind of tidal wave recede and went way back from like $12 to $7, and then it just exploded towards $50. And that could happen. I'm not predicting it, but that's what we have in place right now. Is we have a lot of money, a lot of interest, sentiment going towards gold, and silver is being ignored. Remember, gold also was trashed for years. The last 3 or 4 years, everywhere you turned, every article talked about gold doesn't pay interest, gold is a pet rock, and so on. Silver they kind of ignored. Silver is day in the sun won't happen until gold has been shining for a while. And I think that's what's going to happen. And you'll continue to see the smart money, the small money, buying the sovereign mint coins and buying silver. And then when people want to go to buy silver, there's going to be a big premium on it.
If they can find it.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
they'll be
what'll
able to
happen?
find it. It'll just be
No, what will happen, Rory, is that as we were talking about, there will be massive bottlenecks. They will not be able to mint the coins fast enough because they may have the silver, but it has to be in the form that you can then strike a coin on. And that takes time. And the more people want it, it doesn't even matter. So the reason the premiums go up in those circumstances is not because there's a shortage, because there is an actual shortage of coins you can buy right now. And you can't get them because they're not making them anymore. They're like for right now, they're already on rationed and they're managing to keep up with the demand. But let's say the demand doubles. That's double demand that cannot be met by producing more coins because they can't produce more coins. They're behind. So they have to raise
all
the price and shake them out of the hands of people who are willing to part with them at a 50 to 100% premium over the
the
spot price of silver.
the demand, in my opinion, does not need to double. It only needs to go up
Hmm.
a significant, you know, small fraction of a percentage point on the overall investment money. Right now, it's estimated somewhere around 1% of investors. It's less than one
It's got to be
percent,
less than.
less than 1% of investors in the United States hold gold or silver. And if you've got, say, point 0.2 a 0.2% increase, 20 basis points increase in demand, that's gonna wreak havoc. Period.
Especially because Rory, I remember the chart that we looked at the other day, but we failed to include in the last podcast, showing that the annual silver mining production is worth just about $13 billion.
Right.
Okay, and $13 billion is very little money. There are individuals, hundreds of individuals in the world who have more than $13 billion. So if any measurable amount of money actually wanted to invest in silver, the price would have to go up much, much higher because $13 billion gets you about a year's worth of silver mining production, about 800 million ounces. So right now, the people we say investors, they're not even investors. They're not um, pension funds. They're not
You,
mutual funds.
you
They're
know,
basically just mom and pop people buying a few coins.
right.
So if you ever have any real investment interest in silver, which will happen once gold goes much higher, because there is tremendous amount of investor interest, even though it's lower than it was 10, 20, 30, and 40 years ago, there is still some institutional investment in the West in gold, and there's plenty of investment interest in the East. But silver is going to have to compete with that industrial demand, which isn't going away.
No, that's increasing. I mean, as we were just discussing, and uh, all that we were discussing was the solar aspect of it. That, not to mention, the medicinal side, the technological side. I mean, it's just endless. And there's new uses for silver coming online every single day,
Mhm.
literally every day.
Sure, and the main things are, but there's jewelry and silverware, which that demand doesn't go away. As you mentioned, silver has antimicrobial properties and kills bacteria and things like that. So that's good for medical devices and water filters, and then of course there's the electronics industry because silver is the best conductor of electronics and it's prized for its use in electronics. And as you mentioned, though, Rory, the amount that they use in each cell phone, PC, laptop is de minimis. But in the aggregate, they use about 10 million ounces a year for cell phones demand, 7, 8 million for PCs. And that's 20, 25 million ounces worth of silver that gets thrown away every year.
Gets thrown away, never coming back.
And there are some companies that do extraction processes and try to extract silver, but they also try to extract gold too, which is also in small amounts in electronics as well.
Yeah, but as far as what they're recovering versus what's being thrown out,
No, they don't get a percent. You know what else there is, Rory? We didn't mention was India. We can put some charts up for the listeners on India. India has imported record amounts of silver because, as you know, they've not only put import duties on gold, they've also put a sales tax on it. So they basically have ignored silver, and they're also trying that scheme where they're trying to monetize the gold by asking the Indian people to send them their gold and they'll pay them interest on it. So silver is the beneficiary there, and they're eating up a decent amount of the silver mining production, and that has nothing to do with the industrial demand we're talking about, or the Western silver bar and coin demand that we've discussed as well. So silver is the one where there are no stockpiles. There's a lot of demand, and also there's not that many companies that are involved or engaged in the refining and the production of, as we've seen, the world's largest mint can't keep up with a small amount of silver coin demand, because 60 million coins, if they do that this year, that's less than 10% of the overall silver demand. And as you say, that could increase, but they don't have the capabilities. The mints don't have the capacity to produce silver in quantities 20, 30% higher than they already are now, because they can't meet the demand as it is.
Well,
That's why
actually,
they're on ration.
they have the capacity because, as Eric Dubin pointed out, there was not one coin produced out of it was either West Point or San Francisco.
Yes, they're not using all the mints. That's correct. But the reason they're not, Rory, is it's not just an issue of capacity. The entire industry doesn't have the capacity because they have to have the blanks ready. So the reason they don't run those other mints is they don't have anything to run them with. It's not like they don't have the manpower; they don't have the blanks.
Why wouldn't you increase on that end though?
Because what they did years back was they outsourced. They could. The US Mint obviously is a mint, and they make billions of pennies and nickels and dimes every year. They know how to make these things. They just decided years ago, I think it was during the Reagan years, when they started making these the Silver Eagles, and to outsource it. And you're talking about companies that aren't the largest companies in the world that they've outsourced the making of the silver blanks to. So sure, the mint can make billions of coins. They've proven that, but they haven't proven that the way they're set up for industry to make 100 million Silver Eagles, because they haven't contracted with with companies large enough that can produce the blanks in the quantities and get them there just in time for the U.S. Mint to stamp an eagle on them.
But I thought that the president of Sunshine Mint, who the doc over at Silver Doctors interviewed, I thought he said that they had increased their capacity.
They have. Remember, they have their own business. So
Right.
they're working on satisfying the U.S. Mint and producing all the other white label products that they produce for everybody else, as well as producing Sunshine Mint rounds. So what I'm saying with the United States is done, the U.S. Mint has done, is they've outsourced to companies that don't have the capacity to fulfill needs that they didn't anticipate. Because as we mentioned earlier, they used to get 3 or 4 million sales a year. Now they get that in a couple of weeks. Well, they don't invest in the companies to grow that fast. And, the Sunshine Mint, I'm sure it's grown, but they haven't added capacity to the point where they can meet the demand that the U.S. Mint now currently has. Because they have other demand. As we mentioned, the Silver Institute kind of ignored the silver round and bar demand, but the Sunshine Mint is banging that stuff out in massive amounts.
Folks, if you don't have some silver, I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. No, what I was getting the point of, Eric is correct. They're not running it, and Dave Kranzler has made the same point. They're not running all the mints, but that's because they don't have the blanks for them. And also, there is a point that they both make. At least I've heard Dave make it. Is they don't want to.
You mean Eric Dubin?
I don't. No, but I know I've heard Dave Kranzler make this point.
Okay.
The U.S. Mint doesn't want to produce 100 million ounces. There's a problem then, because now they are taking that silver away from industry.
Well, and that makes sense.
I know that started when they stopped making U.S. Silver coins back in 1960, the end of 64, early 65. Was they were concerned. The United States said that, or John Kennedy himself said that silver serves no monetary use. It's an industrial metal, and he was looking to close down the silver certificate program and to use the silver that they had in stockpiles and push it towards industry. And it makes sense. The United States does not want people buying 200 million silver. Those are supposed to be collector coins. They weren't really supposed to be uh, a hedge against the United States government itself, right? They were just supposed to be nice little collector sets. You give them to your kids. They weren't meant to compete with the U.S. dollar. They weren't, but that's what people are using them for. People are
That is
buying them
correct.
because they're concerned about economic uncertainty.
Because silver's been money longer than gold.
And so, the gold has worked out for them because the U.S. Mint doesn't really sell that much gold in the grand scheme of things. But they're now starting to sell a significant percentage of the world's silver by making 50, 60 million silver eagles a year. That's 50, 60 million ounces, which ends up being an upper single digit percentage of the overall silver mining production. So to Dave Crantler's point, they don't want that to go to 10, 12%. So they're not going to try to contract with more or with the Sunshine Mint for twice as many blanks to be made. It's going to cut into the silver demand.
Okay. Because they can't even answer the question that I've been asking for the past 3 years. Where's it going to come from? And
It's going to be
it's not
taken
going
from
to
one
happen.
source. It's going to be taken, right. The pie is only so large. The only
Right.
place it can come from is they have to take it from someone else. They have
Right.
to take from an industrial demand. And then what happens is the industrial players, remember, they had no problem paying $50 an ounce because the amount that they use in industry isn't that much per unit that they make. They had no problem paying $45, $50 an ounce. You didn't hear complaints back then that the prices of your electronics were going up because of silver, or you couldn't buy this because there was a lack of silver. They'll pay it. But then, of course, if industry is willing to pay it, then investors have to pay it too.
I don't understand. I think that somebody, one of the big electronics firms, has bought a silver mine, and I don't understand why they all wouldn't, like Samsung or
Sure.
LG or whoever.
Lock
Why?
down your forward requirements.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not that expensive. I mean, if you look at what Keith Neumeyer's doing, he's buying gold and silver mines for, I think he said $10 an ounce for gold. I don't know what his silver cost is. But I mean, if the entire amount of annual silver mining production could be bought for $13 billion,
Right.
spend a few hundred million and
Make it happen. That way
yeah.
you've got your go forward supply already locked up. It's right there in the ground. All I got to do is go get it.
I mean, if you think about it, Rory, the price of silver today is lower than it was on average in 1979. And people can talk about, well, that was because of the Hunch brothers. Yeah, but the Hunch brothers highlights the fact that all it takes is an increase in demand for the price to rocket up because the size of the market is so small.
Yep.
And it looks like we're seeing pressure now from the sovereign mint coin demand. Is really pushing into the amount of silver that's available for industry. And that demand isn't decreasing.
Anywhere. It's not. I mean, and people can say, well, manufacturing's down. Well, not in Morocco. Not for silver
I mean,
demand.
solar is growing. You may get a decline in consumer electronics as economies contract, but the solar demand, the plans in India and China, and as you mentioned, Morocco in Africa, they're all planning on increases in solar power. So overall, the industrial demand is not going down, and the investment demand is clearly on the way up.
Got to be. Well, Lewis, one thing, and then we're out of here. The
All right.
Australian gold. Explain what's going on with the Australian gold mining production increase. I think it was like a 28-year high or something. It was some ridiculous number.
I think what's going on there is, again, there's demand for gold. And what happened in the last couple of years, which kind of took a lot of people by surprise, is the decline in oil prices, which makes it easier or cheaper to produce gold, because energy is your largest input, that along with labor. And also the Australian dollar got hit, so their costs came down because they mine in Australian dollars, and they can get cheap oil, so they're able to increase their production. It makes sense. And again, if you're when the price went down the last few years, you have to mine more to meet your costs. So they did, and they were lucky enough to have a low Australian dollar and a lower price of oil to help them achieve those results. So that there's a silver lining in the lower oil prices and the lower Mexican peso, Australian dollar, and so on, where they're not hurt as much, mining more. And that's why they've been able to increase production when you would think they wouldn't be, because the price has gone down.
Now, if you're hitting a 28-year high in mining production in one country for gold, my guess is that they're probably sitting on quite a bit of that.
I don't know about Australia. Australia is probably sending it all to Switzerland to be refined, recast, and sent back their way, but not to Australia, but to China, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, and other places east.
Okay.
Because China produces the world's most gold, and they consume all of it. Russia produces the second amount of gold, and from looking at how much gold they add to the reserves every month, it looks like they're up to about 3/4 of the gold they mine. It seems like they basically take it off the miners, buy it with Russian rubles, and put it into the reserves. So Australia is kind of the largest mining country that's probably exporting, because you got to remember, Australia, Canada, United States, they don't add gold to their reserves. The United States hasn't added gold to its reserves since the 50s. Canada just sold basically the last bit of gold they had. So these countries, the Anglo-Saxon countries, are not, because they're dollar based, they're not interested in hoarding gold, and they're trying to make it seem like it's not worth much. If you think about it, the United States government, the Fed, unless asked by Ron Paul, never mentions gold at all. And Ron Paul's not even there to ask about it anymore. You never hear Obama talk about, we've got to get our gold reserves higher. You never hear that. He doesn't even know where it is, if it exists, and he doesn't even care.
Right.
Yellen, if you go through this, I did this exercise once. I went through the speeches for the last 5 or 6 years of all the Fed presidents, and I did a search for gold. Never mentioned. Goldman Sachs came up a couple of times, but gold itself didn't come up. That's because it's been the dollar. They've been playing this game that the dollar is money since 1971, not a dollar backed by gold, but the dollar is the money. And that's what they've been stickling on, and that's what the media says. You never hear U.S. officials talk about our gold reserves. You would think when the price goes down, any sensible country would. Why doesn't the United States add to its gold reserves? You can never have enough. But they don't. They don't audit it. It's too expensive to audit.
Expensive to audit.
That's really.
And to that argument, I would say, let's cancel one of those non-working F-35 fighter jets and audit the gold.
Oh, you don't even have to cancel anything. The United States owns $19 trillion. Just issue more treasury bonds to pay for the audit. It's not a big deal. They don't want to do it. They don't want any attention on gold. That's just the way things are.
It's unfortunate.
Yep.
But
it's what there has to be, because the United States, in order to run the world reserve currency, has to consciously ignore gold and consciously defend the dollar.
Well, on that note, Lewis, we'll pick this up in a week or so. And
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lewis.